Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We have a wonderful lineup of brand storytellers with us today. They're going to be talking to you about Dirt, their series, and it's a series by Huckberry, and it's been selected for Brand Storytelling 2024. First off, I wanted to congratulate you all for being selected. I'm very excited to talk to you today about the series and get into all the details of how it came about. But before we do that, let's quickly do a round of intros. If you could tell us about yourself and your role on the film, that would be great. I'll kick it off. I'm Natasha Wellesley. I'm the executive producer at Ventureland, and I lead brand storytelling at the company. The company's a creative studio. You may have seen some of our originals work. Currently out is Beckham and The Deepest Breath. And then we also lead brand storytelling projects such as KitchenAid and The Beauty of Blackness and Meta. They came from all over, all who have been previously selected and currently selected for this year's brand storytelling in Sundance in 2024. So to kick it off, I'm going to pass it over to Kate, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Kate West, and at Huckberry, I am the director of Huckberry Presents, which is our Tier 1 media arm. And for Dirt specifically, I'm the co-creator, director, and producer.
My name is Ben O'Mara. I'm the VP of Marketing at Huckberry. So I oversee our creative and content and brand strategy, and have worked closely with Kate and Josh as sort of a executive producer behind the scenes on the Dirt project.
Hey, I'm Josh Rosen, and I am the host and co-creator of Dirt at Huckberry.
Lovely to meet you all, and I'm so thankful that you could all be here today to talk about the project. So let's dive in, shall we? I think starting big and kind of looking at the entire series, I wanted to ask how you were intending to create something that was very unique and had its own voice. And when you kind of conceived this, it was interesting to me that it really stood out from some of the other travel shows that are currently out there. So I wanted to, hear more about that.
Yeah, I can start, and then Ben and Josh, you can elaborate if you have anything else to say. But yeah, Dirt started out as sort of this idea that Josh and I had put together, sort of based on Huckberry ethos, which is really like accessible adventure, I would say, and a pretty raw lens. Huckberry's always had. Has been rooted, a part of Huckberry's business has always been rooted in editorial. So, as they were looking to expand into media, Dirt sort of came out of that. And I think part of what has made Dirt so successful is the cinematography of it. And we hired this company called Workshirt, who are a really great production company. It's two guys, they do it all. So it's very like raw and real. And I think thirdly, it's a totally unscripted show. So we have a plan going into it, but we never really know what we're going to get from the characters. And unlike other companies where there's sort of like an ambassador list you have to stick to, or there specific people you need to work with, Huckberry allows us to tell the stories of really anyone. So that was something that we held on to creating this series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add to that, as Kate alluded to, part of sort of Huckberry's identity, and you go back, Huckberry's now been around for 12, going on 13 years, and a commerce first business, but always with a really strong editorial sort of point of view. And so, even more specifically, like story being foundation to so much that we're doing, whether we're selling a product or we're talking about the people in our community. And I think what Kate and Josh have done such an amazing job, and the rest of the team that works on Dirt is, it is that idea of accessible adventure and sort of a broadening the idea of what travel and adventure could be. And then going back to some of the, as Kate mentioned, like roots of Huckberry, what are some of those stories that, whether they're unexpected or untold, that we can put out in front? And that's always something that our existing audience has really gravitated to, whether that's a brand that they've never heard of or a person, their community that they weren't aware of. And so that combination of obviously being like beautifully shot, unscripted, incredibly talented crew, and then going to places that everyone knows in a sense, but finding those people and finding those stories that are really unique and things that you can't necessarily like Google and find a quick hit list of like the top 10 places to visit in Ireland, the top 10 places to visit in Seattle. And so really taking that like locals approach, I think is also such a foundational part of the DNA to Dirt, and has always been so important to Huckberry when we think about, we have this idea of like adventure is kind of whatever the hell you want it to be. And then another aspect to sort of our lens is like, real people, real stories, real adventures. And so I think Dirt just does such an amazing job of expressing those things, those people, those places. And then to Kate's point again, the actual quality of the output is obviously incredibly high quality, but still feels very, very real in that sort of run and gun unscripted sort of point of view.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, actually. I mean, it feels very connected to the Huckberry brand, and I'm actually curious to know, like, how did the sort of collaboration come about? Was it something that you ideated in-house, or was the idea brought to you, or how did the series, from a brand perspective, how did it come about?
Yeah,
I can talk about like how we, Kate, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think like Ben and I had been talking about serialized content versus just like one-off sort of productions, either feature length shows. And we really while we were looking at kind of new media opportunities, we really believed in serialized content just because it just seemed how people were digesting content. It gives more room for organic development in a way. As you release, YouTube's made it so you can release an episode at a time, kind of learn what's working, what isn't working. You learn that on set too, and then you can always build from that, right? So it's sort of, the series itself has organically developed. I would say, like, going back to the inception of the idea, I think this interconnectedness, and this is where Josh really came in terms of concepting it, was like this interconnectedness between food and adventure. And I think that's one of like the relatable aspects of this show is, on epic mountaineering expeditions, food isn't always can necessarily be a fun factor to incorporate in it. But I think it roots the show in something really digestible, no pun intended, bringing into this aspect of food. And it's fun to shoot. It's fun to be a part of. And, when we were building the concept of the show, it was, and that, yes, it was totally kind of came about in-house. It was like me working with Josh on a different production, kind of concepting it, and then coming back to Ben and bouncing the ideas off him and seeing what was sticky and what worked for the brand. But the interconnectedness, going back to this idea of like the interconnectedness of food and adventure. And Josh, I don't know if you want to elaborate any more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this all comes from a sense of curiosity shared between Kate and myself and the guys at Workshirt, and the openness to sort of discover places that might be hard to get to, or might be a little bit beyond what we think of as the traditional beaten path. And I speaking for myself, when we all got together on the very first day and we journeyed off up 3 feet of snow up to this hot spring with this crew, I realized that we could sort of unlock anything because we were all so focused and curious at the same time, which is really exciting. And for me, that was just kind of like the beginning of this energy that has led into what I think dirt is. And so, anyone has the capability of going to a place, visiting a place, and taking those extra steps and going a little bit deeper. And hopefully, dirt is sort of an inspirational catalyst to that curiosity and that journey. But I think the crew really just has this passion that we share together. And that's what allows us to kind of get deep and get into these beautiful places.
I mean, it's interesting, Josh, because when you're hosting and you're doing the VO, it's a very casual, approachable vibe, and it sort of like complements the visuals and the scope of the journey, but they're quite grand. So you kind of bring this thing of bringing it back down to earth. And I wondered if that was a sort of combination of something that was discussed before the filming.
Absolutely not. I think what's kind of lovely about our journeys is that we all sort of are doing this. We've all worked in and around this world, but we've never done anything like this. So there's kind of a rawness to me. I see that I've never been in front of a camera really, and I just am very curious and excited to see and experience new things and taste new things. And that mixed with the guys at Workshirt's ability to capture a place and really capture texture in a way that, for me, when I'm watching, you feel like you're there. And that's a really difficult thing, I think, to do, is to make it both like beautiful and intense and texturally gorgeous, but also sort of accessible. And potentially my amateurish, just a curious human being energy could hopefully lead to people feeling like that's more accessible, as opposed to like a show where guys are like, I got nothing, I'm going to go out into the woods for a week and figure it out. I mean, that's really cool to watch, but not necessarily approachable. So I appreciate that you're experiencing that, because I do feel like it comes from all of our our energies combined.
And Natasha, that I feel like this full circles back to your original question about sort of like Huckberry and dirt ethos and the overlap. And I think like Huckberry has always been a playful brand, and it's what attracted me to that brand, and still does. Is there's like a playfulness, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. And we're learning as we're doing, and I think that is definitely true to Huckberry. Dirt, we are also learning as we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that it's the theme that comes up talking to you right now is about the cinematography, and it is really beautiful and special. And I feel like in this Ireland episode, there were kind of so many great sweeping grand landscapes, and whether it was with the drones or these beautiful static compositions, you do create this wonder of a faraway land. And I feel like that, like I had FOMO. It's almost like you get the audience to connect themselves and want to, be there and sort of create this kind of desire to be there. And I wondered again, with that sense of scale that you had in all of those big landscapes, it did add, it did add a lot. And I wondered if you could talk to how many conversations you had around that.
Well, in terms of, so the drone footage, we kind of, David and I talked through the edit a lot when sort of the vehicle of transition from place to place is what the drone footage is really primarily used for, and establishing place. And with Ireland, it's everyone, when you go to Ireland, everyone tells you it's a small country, you can drive all over it. But let me tell you, like driving on the left side of the road stick, which Josh had to do, I actually just sat in shotgun, but it's actually not that small. And so we really wanted to kind of show the grandeur of the place, and I think the drone footage did that beautifully. And it wasn't only just a transition device in Ireland, and it was beautiful. We kind of showed up on the first spring week, and so everything was in full bloom. Everyone you could tell had just been through another long Irish winter. And so there was sort of that celebration of sun happening as well in the characters. So it was joyful and was beautiful. And I think we were all visually blown away by the place while we were there.
Yeah, I mean, it does look beautiful. I really want to go. The other thing that looked really beautiful was the food photography. It wasn't typical in terms of that it was romanced in this kind of high frame rate. The food was kind of covered in the moment. I felt that it really felt very natural. You kind of felt like you were in their living rooms or their kitchens or wherever it was, in a very sort of authentic and raw way. And again, was that a sort of decision that was made prior to going into the filming?
I mean, we always try to shoot people in their environments. I think one thing, having a super small crew, I think, is very helpful in people opening up their homes and worlds to us that way. I don't think we're very cumbersome to them, or it's also incredible, just like in Ireland, the amount of hospitality we saw was incredible. I mean, everyone was trying to feed us. I think Josh gained like 11 pounds on that trip because we were just feeding him. And it was so charming. But I mean, shooting that way, one thing that we always try to go into a food scene is we try to kind of document process as much as possible. Sometimes we succeed, other times we don't. But I think showing the process of whether it was with Jess and making the butter, or, fishing for the eels and then cooking the eels with them. But I think that, opening up people, we really do try to be intentional about kind of shooting in people's homes and seeing their worlds, in the most authentic and raw sense, because beauty comes in so many different forms. I remember talking to some of the characters in Ireland and they were like, but my house isn't beautiful. And I'm like, well, but beauty comes in all sorts of ways, I think Sally said that about her fish smoked fish operation, and her house was beautiful,
Beautiful, yeah.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, we are intentional about that.
Yeah.
I also think,
Yeah,
if I can just add to that, I think people have preconceived ideas of what a film crew and a film shoot is going to look like in their house, and that everything's going to be, taken apart. And, we all have our things, like we clean up our house, get everything dialed for guests or whatever. And I think what happens with us is that when we get in there, we usually spend a little bit of time getting to know the people and finding that common ground and that understanding that we're really curious about what they're doing, and we're not going to um, um, make them look in any way that they would be uncomfortable. And then there's that ease into the experience. But that, to Kate's point about having a small crew, it allows us that. And we're all also, I don't know, we tend to be kind of personable, the four of us. There's nobody with a clipboard, there's no one with a headset, there's no, we can also read it, so that if the space is small, we can get the camera setups smaller, and I do feel like people just generally tend to relax and allow us into their world, and then you get that honesty and that really beautiful texture of someone's world.
Yeah, I saw that, especially with the off-camera moments, that made it very personable. Like, was that okay? It's like that humanity comes through, and you really are seeing that these are real people doing their thing in their everyday life. But it's captured so beautifully. You did find some really extraordinary people in this episode, and I was just wondering how you found those rich characters, and did was everybody kind of predetermined before you went into the shoot, or were there some sort of random moments where you were talking to somebody and they were like, oh, actually my friend down the road has the seaweed fishing boat, can we, you guys should go pop on that and experience that?
Yeah. So, what going into episodes, like, I really believe, and this is actually goes back to Dirt and like the inception of Dirt, this idea of having a formula. So like a real, like, whether it's gathering, like a high level, gathering ingredients and then cooking them up at the end, but just like the full circle component of it. So I really tried to build story into each episode. So I dug and dug and dug, and I go down these rabbit holes, and Ireland's incredible. Like, I mean, there's so many rabbit holes and so many stories and so many charming, beautiful, creative people. But kind of Fingal was my first call. And just because I could tell his family had the history of cheese making, it was an obvious start to the journey. And then he put me on Jess in Galway. And Jess just was my best friend for the pre-production process. She's wonderful. She has so many ideas that I think she also came from New Zealand and moved to Galway in Ireland. So she had a kind of what she loved about Ireland, and like I wanted to show that, she, instead of just going and harvesting oysters, she was like, let's go to someone's house and drink tea with them and play with the kids. Like, she saw the full picture. And so I really held on to that vision, and I tend to do that with each of these episodes when I'm building them out. There's somebody, I hold on to someone, a local point of view that I feel like is the one I want to portray. And then it just sort of seems to organically unfold. So everyone in Ireland was connected in somehow. It really, really was organic. Even the eel fishermen in Northern Ireland, like, they knew Jess. And so it was either a connection through Jess or a connection through our chef at the end. And it just really sort of organically unlocked that way.
I would just add, like, to double click on that, what Kate and Josh have done an exceptional job with Dirt. And then even leading into Dirt, when we think about, one of the people always ask me, what do you love most about Huckberry? And it's, often, if not always, my first answer is like the community that we have, whether it's the founders of the brands that we work with or the people that we're working with on more the editorial side of the business. And that was where, again, the dots really connected when Kate and Josh were putting this together and pitching it back to us. How do we continue to create more of an ecosystem to tell these stories in, I would say, more effective ways from a serialized content perspective that Kate said. And they do such an exceptional job of choosing these places that we know we have relationships already. And then finding those people that, going back to what I was talking about earlier, like, who is sort of local there that has a point of view, and really starting with that person or persons to really help craft that story. And that's one of the superpowers that Kate's always had at Huckberry, whether this role or before when she was producing some of our product forward campaigns, is thinking about who's the best person to represent the story that we're trying to express, and then use that person to create the rest of the story and help shape that. And coming back to the origins of Dirt, like as Kate mentioned earlier, Josh was an adjacent friend. We were in the same sort of industry, the same space. Josh knew Kate through relationships, and so it's not to sound frou-frou and like cliche, but like the relationships is really the foundation to it. And Kate working with Josh on a project that was completely separate of Dirt, fast forward to now, is a great example of, I think, that same mentality going into each one of these sort of Dirt curations, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I really do feel like your team did a great job of showcasing, the culture through authentic curiosity. And it feels like that's a thread that's also within the brand of Huckberry, and it's kind of translated within the series. And so there's this direct connection there. The culture comes through from the people, but it also comes through from some of the quotes and the poetry that you've used. I think that's quite an interesting technique, and I think it's something that is unusual, but it really sort of like brings it's sort of a romance to the project, as it were. Specifically the sort of the Yeats quote, I think I've got it written down here, that there are no strangers here, only friends you haven't met yet. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the integration of those quotes.
Well, sure. I mean, literature might be like Ireland's greatest export, right? Like, Irish literature is, you could do a whole series on Irish literature, right? So we did want to, without going too deep down the wormhole, we did want to highlight that in certain capacity. And that particular quote, he's from Sligo. So we wanted to, when we were researching Sligo, we saw that he was from there. And so we just made the intention of incorporating bits and pieces of Irish literature into the VO. And I think going back to like the romanticizing a place, I mean, I think that's what Irish literature, or literature in general and poetry particularly, does really well, you know. And it's funny going into this call and, you know, just like thinking about brand content, I was thinking to myself, like, what are the KPIs for this? You know, like how do we judge success of this? And obviously it's the views on YouTube. I want to make sure Tourism Ireland is happy, but like, and obviously want it to be beautiful to help my portfolio as well and help sell product for Huckberry. But I think like, honestly, like each of these episodes, a KPI is that all these characters I meet and now who I consider my friends are happy with the episode. You know, like I want people to, they're opening up a world to us and showing us their perspective of the world. And I really want them to be happy with how they come across, you know, because it's such a personal endeavor for them. So anyway, that goes, I'm a bit of a tangent, but more about like romanticizing a place and doing it justice, you know.
Mm. I mean, Ireland has had some tough times, hasn't it? And so this idea of this persistence of and preservation of culture there is such an important one, and the traditions and the fact that some of them haven't changed for centuries, and there's a real sort of ingenuity and integrity that comes across from the people in Ireland, and that culture comes across so well. I was curious about the partnership with Tourism Ireland and how they helped the project to
They were incredible,
and
yeah.
how they supported it. Yeah.
So they were incredible. And like, Ben, you can elaborate, but just from a production and post-production process, they were pretty like hands off. They really wanted it. You know, they sort of understood that this was like a brand first show, and they were coming in to essentially sponsor an episode. They put some guardrails in place in terms of what they wanted us to talk about and what they didn't want us to talk about. And how it would work is, you know, we would just sort of have check-ins with our project manager there, probably once a month, and just kind of go through my thought process and who I was thinking to highlight. And they really never had much pushback. And they did actually put forward some suggestions. A lot of time they aligned with my thinking anyway. I think Fingal was on their short list of somebody they wanted us to work with. And I'm trying to think of other examples of characters that they were excited about, but I think that from a partnership standpoint and a creative standpoint, they were incredibly supportive throughout. Mm-hmm. Ben, I don't know if you have anything else to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of two things. I would say, like, one, to continue to give credit to Josh and Kate, like this was, correct me if I'm wrong, was this episode 5 or 4? So 4. Yeah. So there was a great, albeit smaller, but there was a proven series, right? And they could see the quality of the creative, the quality of the storytelling. And I think that was really important in obviously their partnership with us and knowing that this team has created something special and they want to obviously help facilitate this episode and bring their insights and obviously like their goals, but also not redirect the creative to change what it is. I think on the other end of the spectrum, because this is something that we have put a sort of flag in the stand for from a brand perspective, from an investment perspective, we've had opportunities to have other sponsors come in and be much bigger components to previous episodes. But coming back to that point of like the story first and the people first and sort of the creative first, Tourism Ireland was a great partner, not just because obviously that natural synergy and ease to work with, but it was a place that we would want to go anyways. And they were stories that we wanted to tell and that they wanted us to help tell to our audiences. So this wasn't just like slap a logo on something and call it good. this was when they came to the table, and we were talking about ways that we could work together. And like many conversations with brand partners, they start wide and you start thinking about all these sort of net new potentials. And then we kept coming back to like, dirt is something special. Ireland's got some amazing stories, things that like tie directly to a lot of the things that we care about, very well aligned with the type of storytelling we do within dirt. And so it was a really sort of natural partnership in that sense. And again, we're very protective of this property and this creative. And so finding like the right partner is priority one. And so I think all of those points just made it what you see in the end, where it is dirt. It is dirt through and through, with obviously an incredible amount of story and a great point of view on sort of Ireland and the people and the places, and hopefully like it becomes a travel guide for many people that do want to go over and visit Ireland, obviously tying back to some of Visit Ireland's goals. But I think that was a really important piece too, when they wanted to come to the table. You know, we're always a little apprehensive about like quote unquote sponsors, because we want to make sure first and foremost that there's a natural integration. And you'll see that with whether it's a product that's integrated into dirt, or in this case, like Tourism Ireland being the partner in this. It's got to be a partnership and an elevation of the property, and not a complete like 180 and we're just going to do a custom one-off.
Mm. Was it a conscious decision to just have Huckberry Presents and that's the only branding that's in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, and I think actually like Huckberry, I mean, we go back and forth internally, like, is Huckberry too understated in this? You know, like, should there be more Huckberry branding? Should there be everyone wearing Huckberry clothes? But I think like, you know, that's the inherent tension of brand content, as I'm sure you know, it's like, what's the balance? Like, I think that, you know, Ben and the powers that be at Huckberry have done a great job in letting like the story speak first for dirt. And as like the director and producer, it's something that I really appreciate, you know.
Yeah.
But yes, so it's like, you know, Huckberry Presents is the only branding, and it will keep it that way for as long as possible.
Yeah. It seems like the title of the series, Dirt, actually says a lot. How did you come up with that name?
I just called Josh one day and I'm like, I think we should call it Dirt. But I think it's, you know, it's all about getting your hands dirty, even though Josh never seems to have any dirt on him. I'm always covered in dirt. But it's getting, so I mean, it came about really organically. I mean, it's just sort of this idea of just getting into the dirt of the place, you know, literally, you know, digging for vegetables, but also like the people that make up a place, people connected to the land, the adventures that can be had in the dirt, you know. So
yeah. I mean, it also speaks to the format, because if you haven't seen the show, but the format is very much like choosing a chef and then traveling around the country to gather those ingredients and then come back to celebrate all of that food in one event. Is very community driven. Josh, I have a question for you. So being with all of the different people that you came across, were there was it challenging to get the performances out of some of the characters, or how was that process for you?
It's such a joy to go sort of blind into these things, into these people's worlds, and just and dig in and try to find in such a short time. I mean, sometimes we'll see 3 and 4 different people a day, so you have sort of a limited amount of time with them. But there's always a bit of apprehension, because, you know, I totally understand a camera crew coming into your world, and so we do our best to kind of make this, again, it's that comfort, it's creating a space of ease that like we are all truly curious. And it's not just myself, it's very much the entire crew. Is we get there and we're soaking it in, you know. We're not looking necessarily for the best angles, and we're literally like just taking it all in so that we can do our best to express it. And there have been some funny moments, you know. It's an interesting thing as I go in, to Kate's point, it is completely raw, that we're not rehearsing things. We're rarely even talking to the person that we're going to meet with before, to give them any idea of what we're looking for. It's just essential. It's really organic. But there's a moment where I walk into the frame and meet this person for the first time, and there's this like, are we gonna hug? Are we gonna shake hands? And it's like, but I want everyone to feel, if they're comfortable, hopefully I can gauge it. We live in a world where, you don't necessarily want to just go grab and do, but that is that sort of initial feeling of like really curious about, you, and I want to honor you and honor the experience. But yeah, there's always some touchy moments, but that's what just makes it so interesting and exciting, because the ingredients are really the people. One of our chefs in Minnesota, Yia, said something really amazing, and he said, if you want to know about a place, you get to know the people, and if you want to know about the people, you get to know their food. And one kind of key piece that it always feels like, as now I go into these meetings with these people, is that they are the ingredient of that place, right? They are the foundational ingredient of that place, and whatever they're growing or raising or foraging is a reflection of that person and their passion. And so it's always, for me, just that real exciting moment to be like, what is that piece? What are all those connective pieces? And so I think it kind of keeps me going and curious in those spaces.
And I'm sure some of the ancillary moments where you're kind of diving off into ice cold water and doing some of those like sort of experiences, I guess, helps to sort of like bring you into the fold in some of those places as well, because that there was the seaweed kelp baths and all these other areas that you sort of like connect with the culture and the tradition as well as with the food. So
Yeah.
that just sort of adds another layer.
The Josh diving into water it's now he has to do it in every single episode.
In every single episode. I
So
love
it's
that.
what Kate's, regardless of like whether the place is known for water or not, we have to find a body of water for Josh.
Was it cold?
I mean, there is water almost everywhere you go, unless you're in the desert. And there's so much in the water. And from a young age, I've always engaged, always bring a snorkel and mask wherever I go. And so when posing this to Kate, I talked about, and then, we can do activities around things. I love to jump off of stuff. And it just seems everywhere we go that there's some expression of that, and you end up meeting interesting people in that process and finding it's almost like searching for that ingredient, or that person, is like when you jump off of water, you search for that spot to jump into the water. That's going to kind of open up another whole part of a place, that you might not have seen. So it's those little pieces of like discovery that I think come through in the show, which is great, because there's just so much to see in any place you go, and it's just another example of what you can get after.
Yeah, it's a good balance though, because it's not too much. It is a focus on the food, but there's just this other moment, which I think kind of breaks you out of that, and it just allows you to kind of experience the culture in the place. So very much so. So it's had a lot of great comments on YouTube. So it's definitely, the series has definitely been a win for the brand. I think I saw that one of the episodes garnered 1.6 million views. And I just wanted to talk to you about whether, how you felt about that, and that it's definitely been a win for you, and what has the impact been on the brand?
I mean, overall, it's been an incredible impact on a variety of fronts. I mean, first and foremost, it's such an amazing piece of content to be associated with and to be a representative of sort of our brand. I think on the, strategic side, if you will. I mean, when we're able to garner that type of audience and those types of views, it's very, again, for lack of a better term, like top of funnel, and we're getting people in, even if that's their first touch point, and they see Huckberry sort of loosely associated. It creates that sort of intrigue, and we've seen some amazing, from a growth standpoint, YouTube has been a priority channel for us to continue to grow our audience. And Dirt has certainly been the lead in really driving that subscriber base, that audience. And so from that sense, as we continue to expand sort of our ecosystem, Dirt has been one of those catalysts that has created that space and has brought new eyeballs to the Huckberry brand. And then on the other side, we do a ton of, whether it's quantitative and qualitative, customer sort of surveys and mapping where they're coming from. And YouTube and Dirt continues to be an existing customer call out of like, I love Huckberry because, of course, there's the product side and finding the coolest, most quality brands and sort of this active, adventurous lifestyle that we promote. But then that destination where we're not always selling things, we're telling stories, and it creates a deeper relationship with our customers, and it creates, in the end, like more loyalty. And so our existing customers, like, we're really practicing what we preach. If one of our sort of main ethos is like inspiring and equipping adventures near and far, we do that through equipping them through like what we think is the best products and the best brands. And then from an inspiration standpoint, even from an equipping standpoint, going out and experiencing these things, Dirt is a great example of that. So our existing customers, it creates more brand love, more loyalty. They stick around longer. And then from an audience development standpoint, it's just opening up our aperture and creating, for people that have never heard about Huckberry, maybe aren't ready to buy something, they're coming in through that side of the business and really creating a very meaningful connection. And to Kate's point, like, the push into serialized content was also a really important piece, where we're really good at storytelling broadly. We have been on sort of the product side, and we've done some really beautiful, well done sort of one-off video projects. But for us to really create that relationship on the media side, and continuing to improve what we're doing, Dirt has been, again, such a great example of that. So from like a brand awareness standpoint, and then from a customer loyalty standpoint, it's really been a pretty special project in both of those fronts. And to think we're only 6 episodes in, and Kate and Josh are working on season 2 right now. It's pretty exciting when we think about like where Dirt can continue to go and the stories that still remain untold. And then from a tactical sense, how do we continue to find the right ways to distribute this? How do we get more eyeballs in front of the sort of Dirt potential audiences? So yeah, overall, it's been a really amazing project from a brand perspective.
I'm excited to see series 2. So I guess my next question is that obviously now you've done this for yourselves, and I just wondered what your thoughts were in terms of the opportunities around other brand-funded films that you might do. Is there an ambition to go into longer formats? Have you got anything on the horizon that you're looking to develop and explore and expand the Huckberry Presents brand?
I think, yeah, I mean, I can speak a little, and then Ben, please jump in. But we are trying to push Huckberry Presents, as far as it can go, and see what kind of the market and the audience wants. So we have a few projects in development. They're versions of other series. I do think we'd love to test wider distribution on other platforms as well, whether that's for Dirt or for other stories and projects. But yeah, I mean, our sky's the limit. Our ambitions are big.
Yeah, ambitions are big. And I think coming back to some of the things that we've all continued to talk about, there's so many stories broadly to be told. And I think it's a strength and something that we never want to lose, is that, as Josh mentioned, the curiosity, the community. I think on the other end of the spectrum, like, I think we're spending a ton of time now as we're talking about the evolution of Dirt, the evolution of Huckberry Presents, as Kate mentioned. But I think there always can be, as I'm sure you know very well, Natasha, like the temptation of like more new, especially in this world of you could do this, you could do that. And we have the license because of the space that we play, again, the community that we play in, that we could do a lot of different things. And so I think for us, it's certainly like being opportunistic and coming up with new concepts and new ideas. But I think for us, like really continuing to focus on like dirt is working, right? And dirt, as I mentioned, is still in the sort of early stages of what it is and what it can continue to be. And so for us, it's from a focus and resource standpoint, like balancing that temptation to go too wide while also not losing sight of like there's new stories to be told, but also like we've got this amazing sort of sandbox that we've created. Like, how can we continue to evolve and scale dirt? In this case, I'd get it on new distribution platforms, have different iterations that come out of dirt. And so there's high goals and aspirations for Huckberry Presents, and Kate's done a really good job of we've got like different sort of percentages of where we're spending like our development and our sort of budgets. And so like being a little more calculated and like, okay, 20% of our time is going to be on like concepting new ideas, talking with partners about new opportunities, but not let that get so out in front of us that we lose sight on the things that are really working, and continuing to like go deeper and not just the temptation to go wider. And so, yeah, I think Kate's got some amazing fun things in the works. We've got a couple other series under Huckberry that have got some good traction. So that's sort of our focus is ride our winners, and then, you know, use those winners to help leverage new opportunities and new conversations, but not let it derail and detract from what we do have going right now.
Yeah, I can't wait to check those other ones out and to see the new ones as they come to fruition. So I am going to wrap this up, but I thought we could do a little quick fire round of what was your favorite supplier or chef moment on this particular episode for Ireland?
Josh, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think for me it goes to this romantic world that was Fingal. He had such a rich history in the place that his farm is in, several generations going back, and it started with making cheese. And so the farm was built around this world for making cheese, but he, with his curiosity and his passion, sort of built it into so much more, and into this, you know, he was making knives, and he was this big, beautiful farm, and all the different pieces. But essentially, for me, he just really encompassed the passion and dedication to craftsmanship that is Ireland in so many ways. Definitely Fingal.
And I think mine was Rosnaree, where the final feast was, the house we stayed in. So it was sort of like at the end, it was like the one place we stopped. So we were in different hotels, like, or Airbnbs or wherever we were staying for essentially 6 days. And then we were at Rosnaree at the end, and we were able to stay there for 3 days. And it's in the Boyne Valley, which is this like fertile, beautiful, sort of mythological place. And that's where I met Keith and Jenny, who helped me also produce this. And Rosnaree was just something out of like a fairy tale. You know, there was this fleet of evil geese running around and honking at us. And there's this incredible crazy tree where all these peacocks lived. And there was just so much life there. There were a lot of families and creative artists and stuff who lived on the property. And we had just we sort of just fell into this magical existence that I just felt so grateful to see. You know, it was one of those places, even though I was ready to go home and see my family, I was so sad to leave it, you know? But that was just a very cool world in itself, not necessarily one character.
We talked about it. I love the Northern Ireland part of the story, and the eel fisherman, and just that whole, like, his story. And there was also that element of discovery too. Like, I had no idea that eels were caught in the lake, and, you know, the history of sort of that he was correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, like only a couple people doing that still, and the heritage and lineage that he is continuing on, being one of the last remaining few, was just I loved all of that, between, again, the history of Ireland, the discovery of the place in the largest lake in the UK and Ireland. I thought it was just such a perfect example of the undiscovered stories that Dirt does such a good job in bringing to the forefront.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I loved all of those moments, and in particular the stingy nettle moment. So I'm not sure if you actually got stung, but that was that was a surprise.
Always a surprise, but a huge surprise that was the thing that finally took me out, and not the many silly things that I attempt.
Exactly.
But that's life, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you all. Thank you so much for being here today to talk about Dirt, the series. If you haven't seen it, you really ought to go and check it out, because it truly is such a feast to the eyes. And yeah, I wish you all the best for brand storytelling. Hopefully we'll see you there in person, and for future episodes of the series. I can't wait to watch them. So thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.